A young analyst uncovers China's secret strategy and Washington isn't ready to fight back. The funny thing about secrets is they never stay buried, especially when they're built on racism. And in Washington, some secrets are too dangerous to speak aloud unless you're the one forced to live with them. Elliot Tran hadn't planned to be the center of anyone's narrative. He wore the quiet like a second Skinan Asian American born in Houston to Vietnamese immigrants, fluent in 3 languages, and perfectly invisible in the halls of national power. That was the point, until the memo landed on his desk. It was supposed to be routine, a flag transmission buried in a Mandarin dialect variant, picked up off the coast of Guangdong. But as he decrypted the lines slowly, painstakingly, Elliot's heart stopped. This wasn't noise. It was a strategy, and it wasn't aimed at Washington's military or satellites. It was aimed at America's soul. He leaned back, eyes scanning the room, the cubicles of fellow analysts unaware that a ghost had just stepped through their walls. The document wasn't about missiles. It was about culture, about division, about weaponizing race, history, and wounds that America never truly healed. For days he sat on it, staring at the screen. He triple-checked the linguistics, consulted AI translation patterns, even ran it against Cold War-era deception frameworks. The message was clear. Beijing wasn't preparing for a conventional war. It was preparing to make Americans hate each other more than they hated any foreign power. And it was working. "Is this a joke?" his supervisor barked, tossing the printout onto Elliot's desk after he dared to report it. "Are you trying to get yourself reassigned?" "No, sir," Elliot replied, voice flat. "I'm trying to keep us from bleeding ourselves dry." The man scoffed. "You're reading too much into this. Stay in your lane." But the lane Elliot had stayed in his whole life, quiet, obedient, hyper-competent, was the same lane that let this slip by everyone else. He wasn't white enough to be trusted, not Chinese enough to be guilty, just ambiguous, just enough to disappear. Except he didn't want to disappear anymore. That night, alone in his apartment, Elliot stared out the window toward the Capitol. He thought of his father, who never spoke of the war. He thought of the slurs whispered in grade school, the assumptions in college admissions, the side-eyes in government briefings. And now, a global strategy that thrived on that same rot. They weren't preparing for war, they were preparing for America to destroy itself from the inside, using race as kindling. He opened a blank file. Operation Harmony Disrupt Internal Memo. The name was ironic. He smiled bitterly. A week later, he took the risk. He met with Congresswoman Daniela Ruiz, one of the few with the guts to speak out against institutional rot. She listened, stone-faced, as he laid out the evidence. "They're betting on us hating each other?" she asked quietly. "They're not betting," Elliot said. "They're investing, seeding. Black versus Asian, Latino versus white, police versus community, red versus blue." He nodded. "This isn't intelligence," she said. "This is cancer." But no one wanted to hear that. The attacks began quietly. First, a smear article in a fringe blog. Anonymous analyst leaks fake China plot, possible CCP sympathizer. Then an internal probe. Then whispers in the cafeteria. Then silence. One morning, Elliot found his badge deactivated. Security protocol, the email read. But the protocol wasn't national, it was racial. He'd become too dangerous, not because he was wrong, but because he was right. And because he was proof that the threat didn't come from across the ocean, it came from within. He turned to the press. No one listened. He reached out to activist networks. They were suspicious. He tried academia. The papers were rejected. The strategy was working. 2 months later, a riot broke out in Oakland. Black and Asian youth clashing violently after a manipulated deepfake circulated online. No one knew where it came from. No one wanted to ask. Elliot watched from his living room, horror rising. This was what the memo predicted. Not with tanks. Not with bombs. With fear. And then came the call. A gravel voice. "We've seen the file. We want to meet." He was flown, quietly, to a remote facility in Utahan unofficial task force under DHS. He entered a conference room of faces like his, Brown, yellow, mixed, women, queer, disabled people who never made it into the good old boys club of intelligence, but who saw the cracks before anyone else. They had a name for it now, Operation Fracture. And they had evidence, real, tangible data of targeted misinformation, racial baiting, psychological ops on social platforms. Not theory. Fact. All of it traceable. We're too late to stop it, said Maya, a half-Filipina cyber warfare expert. But maybe not too late to slow it down. Elliot nodded. For once, he said, maybe being invisible is our weapon. Elliot hadn't been in a war room before, at least not one like this. No mahogany tables, no generals in uniform. Just a long folding table, too many cables, and the hum of overclocked servers in the next room. The air smelled like instant coffee and sweat. Maya unrolled a digital projection across the Walla map of the U.S., pulsing in slow, grim colors. Dots blinked across cities. Atlanta, Minneapolis, Seattle, Houston. Not military targets. Communities. These aren't locations of violence, Maya explained. They're where algorithmic manipulation is peaking. Online discourse, comments, video recommendations, search terms all being nudged in real time. By who? Elliot asked, though he already knew. Some of it's run from Shanghai, some from anonymous nodes bouncing through Eastern Europe. But the fingerprints? They're undeniably Chinese intel. They've adopted Russian-style psyops and fused them with long-range cultural targeting. We call it civic destabilization engineering. The phrase chilled him. It wasn't espionage. It was social corrosion at scale. We believe it started years ago, said an older woman seated near the back. Possibly post-Ferguson. They studied our fracture points and waited. Every protest, every racially charged headline night all feeds their model. They're not inventing division. They're feeding it. Elliot watched the map again, blinking red in a rhythm he couldn't unsee. How does it work? Maya tapped her tablet. They pose as activists on both sides. Pro-police, anti-police. Anti-Asian, black nationalism. White grievance forums. Latino displacement conspiracies. All operated by AI-enhanced personas. Thousands of them. Why haven't we shut it down? A young black analyst with a nose ring leaned forward. Because the agencies that could stop it are fighting each other, too. DHS doesn't trust the FBI. NSA won't share source code with DoD. Congress is stuck in hearings. Everyone's pointing fingers. And the public? Elliot asked. Already numb. They think every side is lying. Or worse, believe only their side is telling the truth. Either way, the outcome's the same, chaos. Later that night, Elliot sat alone in the task force dormitory, a low concrete structure meant for temporary operations. Rain tapped the windows in gentle, arrhythmic waves. He read through his notes again, then through the translated memo that started it all. The original Chinese phrase still echoed in his mind. Divide the dragon to blind its eyes. They didn't need to destroy America. They just needed to make it stop seeing itself as one nation. He remembered his father's voice, quiet, worn from factory work and refugee silence. Don't make noise, Elliot. Don't let them see too much of you. But the noise was everywhere now, and they were seeing just enough to use him against himself. Over the next few weeks, the team built what Maya called the kill switch, a framework for countering the influence campaigns in real time. Not by matching propaganda with propaganda, but with truth. It was risky. Transparency didn't go viral the same way outrage did. But if they could seed the right narratives, ones that exposed manipulation without sounding like conspiracy, it might slow the rot. Elliot's role was crucial. You're the bridge, Maya told him. Asian American, insider to government, outsider to power. You can say things the rest of us can't. And people will listen because you were almost invisible until now. Or they'll ignore me, he said flatly. Maya shrugged. That's always a risk. But you're the only one who saw the blueprint. That means something. They started testing small. An explainer video, anonymously published, dissecting how racial narratives were being artificially amplified in trending feeds. A bot network tracker, visualizing fake activist profiles pushing anti-black sentiment through Asian American pages. A leaked text string showing how a Chinese state-linked bot misused an MLK quote to stoke division. Some posts were ignored. Some were deleted. But others went viral not with fire, but with curiosity. People began to ask, why is this post phrased like that? Why does this outrage feel weirdly perfect? Who benefits when we fight each other? It was working. Then the backlash came. Fox News ran a segment calling the efforts woke psyops. A congressional subcommittee accused the task force of violating First Amendment rights. Anonymous sources from within the CIA claimed Elliott was part of a Pan-Asian anti-patriot cabal. His face was doxxed. His family in Houston received threats. An uncle called and said, "You need to stop, Elliott. They're saying you're a spy." The irony punched him in the chest. But worse than the threats was the silence from the very agencies he once served. No statements, no protection, just abandonment. "They're letting you take the fall," Maya said, pouring bourbon into chipped paper cups as they watched the smear storm grow. "You're too brown to be the hero, too Asian to be the victim. They'll make you the enemy." Elliott didn't flinch. "They've always made people like me the enemy when it's convenient. You still want to go public?" He nodded. "Then we better get it right." The final stage of the operation was called mirror drop. A mass data dump meticulously curated off internal Chinese memos, forged activist profiles, fake protests planned online, and audio intercepts of operatives discussing strategies for stoking Asian-Black tensions and manipulating Latino identity movements. But it had to be more than proof. It had to connect. So they added human voices testimonies from real people who had been unknowingly swept up in the manipulation. A Black mother whose son joined a violent protest organized by bots. A Korean business owner whose shop was burned down after misinformation spread in her community. A white police officer framed by deepfake audio into sounding like a racist monster. And Elliott's voice, narrating the entire chain from memo to riots. No anger, no blame, just facts and pain. They dropped it across YouTube, X, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, encrypted forums. Everywhere. Within hours, the response was electric. Not because people believed it immediately, but because for the first time they paused. What if this was true? What if we were being played? That pause, that moment of doubt and hate was the wedge they needed. Cable news refused to cover it. But podcasts did. Independent journalists did. Teachers assigned it. Activists debated it. Communities began creating local signal check groups to monitor manipulation. Churches held forums. Libraries posted counter-disinfo toolkits. Barbershops printed QR codes linking to the Mirror Drop archive. It wasn't a revolution, but it was resistance. And yet, not everyone was happy. A Senate Intelligence Committee subpoenaed Elliott. He was forced to testify behind closed doors. "Did you disseminate classified information to the public?" they asked. "No," he replied. "I disseminated truth." "You are not authorized to define that." "No one is," he said. But someone had to act. The verdict was murky. No criminal charges. But no reinstatement either. He was blacklisted. Maya went back to a university role. Others on the task force scattered. Elliott moved to Oakland. He taught high school civics under a new name. Every Friday, he let his students debate real-world events, asking them not just what happened, but who benefits when we fight over it. Some rolled their eyes. Some listened. One day, a student came up and said, "Mr. Tran, my mom says we shouldn't trust anyone anymore, but I think we have to trust something, right?" Elliott smiled. "Yes, but not blindly. Trust is a muscle. You train it." That night, he opened his laptop. The Mirror Drop archive had surpassed 10 million views. Some had called it fake. Others, revolutionary. But most importantly, it was still up. And somewhere in a basement in Shanghai, someone was watching. Someone was adjusting. The war wasn't over. But Elliott had proved one thing. You don't have to win the whole war. Just hold the line long enough for others to see the battlefield. 3 months passed. The country had not healed. But something had shifted. The narrative was no longer solely owned by rage or fed entirely by unseen hands. Mirror Drop had created ripples tiny, chaotic, unpredictable, and in some places those ripples formed waves. But power doesn't yield easily. And Elliot Tran had learned this the hard way. On a cool October morning, a stranger knocked at his apartment door in Oakland. A woman tall, elegant, in a gray coat that screamed federal, but without a badge. "Mr. Tran," she said, though he hadn't used that name in weeks. "You need to come with me." He hesitated. "It's not a threat," she added. "It's a request, but not one you should ignore." Elliot followed her. They drove in silence, past shuttered stores and graffitied walls, down I-880 towards San Jose. The car was unmarked, the plates private. Elliot watched the freeway signs blur, half wondering if this was the day he disappeared for good. Finally, they arrived at an unassuming tech campus surrounded by tall fences and eucalyptus trees. Inside, it looked like a startup open-plan desks, smartboards, craft coffee. But the people were older and sharper. "Welcome to Threshold," the woman said. "Private intelligence. Technically not U.S. government, but adjacent. We do the work the public sector's too slow to admit needs doing." "Why me?" Elliot asked. She smiled faintly. "You've already done it." Threshold had resources teams of data scientists, ex-spies, sociologists, even poets and behavioral psychologists. But what they lacked was vision, someone who had seen the threat early and understood it not just technically but culturally. "You saw the pattern," said Raj, Threshold's director, a British-born Sikh who had once served MI6 and now worked in Silicon Valley. "And more importantly, you acted. That's rare. Especially for someone who looks like us." He meant it both as praise and warning. "We've analyzed the aftershocks of Mirror Drop," Raj continued. "We estimate it disrupted nearly 30% of active racial polarization campaigns. That's unprecedented." "But not enough," Elliot said. Raj nodded grimly. "No, they're adapting. Faster than we expected." He pulled up a screen. The interface showed deepfakes, chatbot transcripts, forum riposte, waves of content more advanced than before, smarter, subtler. "They've begun seeding unity disinformation," Raj explained, "posing as reconciliation groups, pushing false peace narratives to numb real pain. They learned that division works, but so does dilution. If people stop caring, they stop resisting." It was sickly brilliant. Don't just stoke hate. Eventually, flood the system with fake love. "Same goal," Elliot muttered. "Disarm us, just with a different flavor." Raj tapped the screen. "We need someone who knows how to fight fire with clarity. We want to give you a team, funds, autonomy. Help us build the next Mirror Drop." Elliot didn't respond right away. He thought about Maya, about the high school students who still emailed him links, asking, "Is this one real?" About the immigrant communities caught in algorithmic crossfire. He thought about his parents. And then he said, "I'll do it. But we don't build a defense system. We build an immune system, something that doesn't just respond, but adapts." Raj smiled. "That's why you're here." They called the new initiative Project Clearveil. The concept was radical. Instead of just unmasking bad actors, it would train the public to recognize manipulation at a glance. Like a vaccine, not perfect, but enough to build resistance. They built tools. Pulse, a browser plugin that showed users the likely origin and agenda behind trending posts. Story Mirror, an app that lets students compare narratives from different regions and see how the same event was portrayed differently, often by bots. The Echo Journal, a digital zine published weekly with personal stories from people who'd been manipulated and how they fought back. But the core of Clearveil wasn't technology. It was storytelling. They hired playwrights, comedians, even pastors. Elliot led a team that toured colleges, community centers, and prisons, not to lecture but to listen, then show how their stories were being weaponized. It wasn't always smooth. In Detroit, a crowd shouted him down, convinced he was just another government pawn. In Albuquerque, a librarian broke down in tears, saying she'd shared bot content for months before realizing what it was. In Little Rock, A white veteran called him brave and suspicious in the same sentence. But again and again people leaned in. Not because Elliot was a hero, but because he wasn't. He was just a guy who saw the strings and chose to pull back the curtain. Meanwhile, the opposition evolved. Beijing launched Project Serpent's Tungian AI operation trained on American literature, political rhetoric, and theology. It didn't just generate divisive content, it wrote speeches, sermons, even entire novels designed to fracture cultural empathy. It was brilliant and horrifying. Threshold analysts began disappearing, burnout, fear, threats. Elliot stayed, not out of bravery, but because he couldn't go back. The moment he'd read that memo, the old Elliot had died. The man who just wanted to blend in, be useful, stay quiet. This Elliot had nothing left to lose. Then, disaster struck. Pulse was hacked. Thousands of users suddenly received reverse signals. Trusted posts were marked as propaganda. Real activists were flagged as bots. Communities imploded. Threshold scrambled to repair the breach. But the damage was done. Trust was a fragile thing. And once broken, it didn't return with a patch. Elliot sat alone in the server room that night, staring at error logs. For a moment, he felt the weight of futility settle on his chest. What if we're just putting bandages on a corpse? He whispered. Maya, who had rejoined the project just months before, entered quietly. You think they haven't asked that in every war? She said. This isn't war. This is entropy. She placed a worn copy of The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin on the table. You said we're building an immune system. That means relapses, flare-ups, failures, but also memory and regeneration. Elliot looked at the cover, the creased spine. Hope isn't the opposite of despair, she added. It's what grows inside it. In the spring, Clearvale made one final push. Not viral, not flashy, just consistent, human, stubborn truth. They trained thousands of volunteers in media literacy, barbers, bartenders, librarians, mosque imams, youth pastors. They partnered with TikTok creators and ASMR YouTubers. They published multilingual zines in laundromats and bus stations. They ran a hotline where people could forward suspicious content and get a response from a real human. And they shared one message. Someone wants you angry. Ask why. 1 year after the mirror drop, Elliot stood in front of a crowd in Philadelphia. It wasn't a conference. It wasn't a protest. It was a block party. Families, food trucks, a gospel choir warming up. A banner above read, Story Sovereignty, Reclaiming Our Narratives. He took the mic. I used to think the enemy was across the ocean, he said. And in some ways they are. But the real enemy is the silence we let live between us. The stereotypes we adopt when it's convenient. The histories we erase to feel safe. He scanned the crowd, faces of all shades, nodding, frowning, unsure. They studied our wounds and used them, but we can study them too. We can stitch what they tried to slice. We don't need to agree on everything. Just this: we are not each other's enemies. The crowd clapped. Some cried. Some just listened. But for the first time in months, Elliot felt something real. Not victory, but possibility. That night, he received an email from an unknown address. No subject, no body, just a link. He hesitated, then clicked. It was a live stream. A man, Asian, maybe Vietnamese, middle-aged, wearing glasses, sat in a quiet office. He spoke in Mandarin, but the subtitles were in English. We lost our narrative, he said. Not just ours. When we turned stories into weapons, we forgot that they are also bridges. We can still build one, even now. Elliot watched until the feed cut out. He didn't know if it was a trap, or a message, or a defector. He didn't care, because the truth was spreading again. Not like wildfire, but like seeds. 6 months passed. Clearvale stabilized. The Pulse plugin was rebuilt from the ground up, open-sourced, decentralized, unmonetized. Volunteers now maintained regional nodes, ensuring no single point of failure. Still imperfect, but no longer fragile. Elliot kept his distance from DC. He'd been invited to brief the House Committee on Intelligence, to participate in closed-door Pentagon strategy groups. He declined each time. "They're still playing catch-up," he told Maya over breakfast one morning. "Still trying to treat this like a Cold War. But it's a cold mirror. And we're the ones fogging it up." He wasn't being cynical, just clear. For Elliot, it was never about defeating China. It was about seeing ourselves before someone else decided who we were. Then came the synth broadcast. April 17th, 3:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every major streaming platform across the US Netflix, YouTube, Amazon Prime, Hulu, TikTok interrupted programming simultaneously. Screens froze, then flickered into a strange, unreal video. A split screen. On the left, American riots. Police in tactical gear. Black bodies on pavement. Confederate flags. Subtitled, "This is what democracy defends." On the right, clean streets. Smiling Asian families. Drone deliveries. Classrooms in silence. Subtitled, "This is what stability provides." Over it all, a calm AI voice. "You were promised freedom. You got chaos. Choose better. Choose order." The video lasted 47 seconds. Then the feeds returned to normal. No platform could trace the intrusion. No one claimed responsibility. But everyone knew. This was the climax. Within hours, the country teetered. Fox News denounced it as psychological warfare. MSNBC called it a taste of our own distorted reflection. Twitter/X fractured some, praising the message. Others enraged. Churches preached about the end times. Hacktivist groups began targeting Asian American communities, wrongly assuming complicity. Elliot didn't sleep. He spent 2 straight nights on forums, feeds, community boards, calming where he could, redirecting where he couldn't. Clearveil servers strained under the spike. By the 3rd day, Clearveil had launched a campaign. Unedited US videos from everyday Americans contrasting manipulated clips with real life. A black ER nurse from Milwaukee. A Chinese-American farmer from Fresno. A white Appalachian teacher. Each one spoke into the camera. "This is me. Not your version of me." The movement caught on. TikTok stitched unedited US clips into duets. Students remixed them with jazz, gospel, mariachi. It was messy, sometimes contradictory, but it was true. And truth, Elliot realized, didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be owned. But even as clarity spread, pressure mounted. The president, under bipartisan pressure, announced Operation Info Shield, a military-civilian alliance tasked with neutralizing foreign digital threats. It sounded noble. But within a week, the operation had flagged over 12,000 domestic accounts for amplifying foreign narratives, including journalists, educators, and 3 members of Congress. Elliot saw the trap instantly. "We're becoming what we fear," he told Raj during a threshold call. Raj nodded, exhausted. "We trained for an invasion, but not an infection." Elliot looked into the camera. "I think it's time." Raj understood. Time for what? For me to disappear. The next day, Elliot released his final message. A simple video, just his face. No music, no cuts. He spoke calmly. "I'm not your leader. I never was. I'm just a guy who read the wrong email at the right time." He smiled faintly. "China didn't trick us. They studied us. And then showed us who we already were, what we feared most. And we reacted exactly the way they knew we would." He paused. "But that's not the end of the story, because now we know. And what we do with that knowledge, that's the real threat to them." A final line. "Don't look for me. Look around you. The mirror is in your hands now." Then static. The video vanished within minutes. Clearveil scrubbed all references. Elliot Tran went dark. Weeks passed. Operation Info Shield faltered, mired in lawsuits, exposed for flagging innocent citizens. Congress held emergency hearings. The narrative shifted again. But Elliot's work endured. At a community center in Atlanta, a 9-year-old black girl led a workshop on spotting fake headlines. In Seattle, a homeless shelter screened store mirror videos during dinner hours. In Des Moines, a retired white pastor told his congregation, "The devil doesn't come with horns anymore. He comes with headlines." A new phrase began to appear in graffiti, sermon titles, and protest signs. "No one owns our story." Maya never stopped. She expanded Clearvale into Latin America and parts of East Africa. She trained local teams, shared infrastructure, and taught communities how to adapt the model to their own contexts. One night in Nairobi, she opened her laptop and found an encrypted message, just a string of coordinates. She smiled. He was still out there, not hiding, just planting seeds. In a quiet part of Laos, near the Chinese border, a small school had recently opened. No name on the sign, just a symbol, a mirror, cracked but whole. Inside, children learned coding, storytelling, history, misinformation detection, Mandarin and English. Some called it an orphanage, others a front. But everyone knew this. No one who entered left unchanged. Back in the States, the cultural tides turned. The 2026 elections saw a 40% youth voter turnout, highest in 4 decades. Disinformation campaigns still ran but were increasingly ineffective. People had grown faster than the lies. News networks once addicted to outrage began offering weekly truth reconciliation segments. And a new holiday was proposed. Narrative Daya, national observance to share stories, unfiltered, across communities. Passed with bipartisan support. Because, for the first time in years, America had something to agree on. It was sick of being told what it was. It was ready to remember who it could be. And Elliot? No one ever saw him again. But stories whispered in Oakland, New York, Hanoi, Johannesburg, and even Beijing spoke of a man who helped America see itself not through fear or control or denial, but through clarity. And in that clarity, hope. The end.